I'm going to open up a public hearing on House Bill 2392. Madam Administrator.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, House Bill 2392 modifies the requirements for health benefit plans to cover expenses relating to hearing loss treatments. And we have some folks.
Why don't you call the first panel?
Reagan Gray, Chad Ludwig, and Claire Leak, or Leak.
Chair Greenlick and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Reagan Gray, and I am typically in front of your committee representing a client, but today I am a parent of a child with bilateral profound hearing loss. And my story is when Anya was 1 year old, we noticed that she wasn't developing speech at the rate that her older sibling had. And so we went in to get her hearing tested and found out that she had this hearing loss. And then my next thing was I needed to get her hearing aids. And that's when I ran into the problem with the current insurance mandate for covering hearing aids for kids. It obviously isn't adequate because of, and I'll tell you about the issues that I had. So I contacted my insurance provider and said, who can I go see where you guys will cover it at the highest rate that you'll cover it, that's in an in-network provider. They were able to give me one person. I contacted that person to set up an appointment, and they had a 2-year waiting list. So I contacted the insurance company again and said, okay, you've got to have somebody else that I can go to and be able to purchase these hearing aids where you guys will cover it. And they gave me 5 phone numbers, and I called those phone numbers, and it was diabetes equipment, wheelchairs, everything but hearing aids. Went back to the insurance company again, got 5 more numbers, and then it devolved even further. I even got a phone number for a auto body repair shop. So at this point, I was getting pretty close to open enrollment, and so I switched insurance plans, made sure that the plan covered the pediatric audiology group at OHSU, and was able to get into an appointment in about 3 to 6 months, and finally got her hearing aids. It took me a year. Wow. A year to get her hearing aids. She was 2.5 by the time she had her own hearing aids. The other issue that I had was she needs FM, and all children need FM receivers in their hearing aids to go to school. And because teachers wear these things that are essentially microphones that'll go directly into the hearing aid. Without that, the rustling of papers, kids making noises, creates too much of a block, and they aren't getting they're not getting the sound information that they need. I also need one at home with her, and I wear it around. It helps her really hear the enunciation and hear like the T's in a word, or the S at the end of a word. And also it's a safety issue at the park. She can't hear me if she's running into the street, but she can hear me if I'm wearing this. This was not covered by insurance. I paid $3,000 out of pocket for this. So after my experience, I reached out to the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Advisory Committee to identify folks that have experienced similar things, and it was a group of parents, educators, and providers, and from that we came up with the language that you see before you. So what this bill does is it updates the current mandate that we have in law, and what we're asking to add into that is paying for the initial and ongoing hearing evaluations for children. And I really want to stress the ongoing hearing evaluations. Their hearing changes over time, and the hearing aids need to be tweaked to deal with that. And so we really need to be covering those appointments. Fitting and verification processes when they dispense the hearing aids. The supplies required for the use of the hearing aids, like the ear molds, and these ear molds need to be remolded often because children grow, and as soon as there's a little bit of space where air can get in, it's just this feedback, that high-pitched feedback noise that the kids get, and essentially the hearing aid doesn't work for them at that point. Also covering equipment like this, the FM systems and other assistive listening devices. Cochlear implants are not currently in the statute, and I've heard from parents that had a lot of difficulty getting their insurance companies to cover that. And cochlear implants are amazing in allowing children that weren't able to benefit from hearing aids to now access sound.
I remember putting that as a statute.
Well, we put a hearing aid mandate into the statute, I believe it was in 2009, but cochlear is not listed in there, in the statute, the current statute. So we ended up adding it in the language. The other thing was requiring insurance companies to contract with an adequate number of pediatric audiologists so that the situation that I had doesn't happen again. I wanted to thank the committee for introducing this bill as a committee bill and giving us the opportunity to speak on it. I've heard the story from other parents. I've heard similar stories from providers. I kind of take the opportunity now every time I have an appointment with a new provider and ask them, what kind of problems have you had with billing, or what kind of issues are you having with, are you seeing your families having with access and costs? And I think that we've identified a lot of issues in this piece of legislation, and I really hope that we can do this session. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good to see some of you here today. My name is Chad Ludwig. I'm president of Oregon Association of the Deaf, and I'm here to support this bill. Some of you may remember 2015 legislative session where we were looking at SB 449A to establish Oregon Hard of Hearing Service, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, but that bill didn't survive. And instead, Ways and Means awarded a $200,000 grant to do a community needs assessment. A Western Oregon University did that report, and that report was posted last December. Part of the community needs assessment, the university met with a lot of families and parents and healthcare professionals. And the stories were overwhelming about the critical needs of access, needs for audiologists and hearing aids. That there was a need because they weren't involved without that. There was issues of isolation, of separation, of depression. And so we wanted to take time to recognize those needs and ask you to really support this bill. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Greenlick and members of the committee. My name is Claire Leek. I'm here in support of House Bill 2392, which, as you know, is to update the current hearing aid mandate. I am a speech and language pathologist who works exclusively with children with hearing loss to help them develop their listening and spoken language skills. I cannot reiterate enough the importance of early diagnosis, early access to sound, and quality intervention. When these components are in place, children with hearing loss are able to overcome the challenges of having a hearing loss. They may attend their neighborhood school alongside hearing peers, require fewer special education services, and become productive members of our community. Denials, long waits for evaluations, and high out-of-pocket expenses for necessary equipment should not prevent our children with hearing loss from receiving or from achieving their full potential. Families and employers who pay for private insurance should be able to depend on their insurance to cover the services and technologies that are necessary to help grow babies' brains. Our families know time is precious, and we want insurance companies to acknowledge that too. So Reagan covered a few components of the bill, but I want to reiterate some of the components. So the bill would update legislation to cover all evaluations which are necessary for audiologists to track children's hearing losses over time, as they may fluctuate or change and new equipment might be needed. It would require the coverage for the fitting and verification procedure, which is the procedure an audiologist does to make sure that the hearing aid or cochlear implant is providing the benefit that the child needs. Finally, it would cover additional supplies like batteries or ear molds that are needed to make sure a hearing aid works. A hearing aid does not function without those pieces. And finally, it would cover repairs for hearing aids. A child, on average, hears 12,000 words a day. So when a child's equipment is not working, they're missing out on the critical language that they need to build their baby's brains. When they're missing a year because of long waits, they're missing out on thousands and thousands and thousands of words. I also just want to speak briefly on the assistive listening devices that are covered in this bill, so FM and DM systems.
Briefly, please.
Yeah. So those, again, help children hear in noise and at a distance, which are necessary in a lot of environments that children participate in, like church, sporting events, for safety, and to hear friends at a birthday party. And then finally, it would cover cochlear implants when medically necessary. As far as I know, there's only one state in the United States that covers both hearing aids and cochlear implants for children, the state of Wisconsin. That's my birth state, and I would be honored if my current home state joined the ranks and really showed families that we care about children with hearing loss, and that when a child is born with hearing loss in this state, and there's about 100 a year, our families know and can rest assured that their children are covered.
Thank you. Are there any questions in this panel? Would you call the next panel, please?
Orla Maloon, Ann Smith, Amanda Haas.
Please remember to identify yourself.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Arla Mellum, and I am a pediatric/educational audiologist working at Columbia Regional Program for deaf and hard of hearing students in Portland, Oregon. And our staff provides services to over 500 children across 4 counties who are aged birth to 21 years who've been diagnosed with hearing loss. And I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 2392, which would change the mandate requiring private insurance providers to include the necessary services and technology to the deaf and hard of hearing students who require these components so that they can maximally access their education and achieve their true learning potential. These services would include paying for hearing evaluations, providing appropriate hearing aids or cochlear implants and their upgrades, and subsidizing other equipment such as FM systems or assistive listening devices, which Reagan spoke about, accessories and replacement parts. The problem has been that research has shown that if children are not identified early and are not amplified appropriately and consistently, they may fall further and further behind their hearing peers in areas of auditory development, speech and language acquisition, social skills, literacy, and academics. And there are some statistics out there that show that children who do not receive treatment for hearing loss cost the education system an additional $420,000 and are faced with overall lifetime costs of $1 million in special education, lost wages, and health complications. And in my experience, and I've been doing this a long time, private insurance companies have not always paid for what we need them to pay for. They haven't always paid for ongoing hearing evaluations, which is absolutely critical as the first step in determining appropriate treatments for children. And now we're seeing children, soon after birth due to the newborn hearing screening. So that is awesome. But in the past, it hasn't been paid for always. Insurance companies have not always paid for appropriate hearing devices. And I've seen families be so stressed and troubled and confused about where they're going to get the money for these hearing aids. And we've had to scramble around trying to find alternative funding sources. And this is, we need to have this mandated, whether it's for one ear or both ears. Families have not routinely been able to upgrade their children's devices to keep up with changes to their child's hearing loss. As Reagan was saying, kids' hearing losses do changes in their needs to listen, and changes in technology. And as you, I'm sure, know, hearing aids, cochlear implants, they're miniature computers. And we have to keep up with changes in technology to provide kids what they need. And we have to fit them properly. We have to verify them, which is the job of the audiologist. And we need to make frequent changes to programming, especially for young children who are just learning language. We need to cover non-warranty repairs of the equipment, ear molds, and batteries, which has been talked about. And in the past, and we've talked about FM systems, which is as if you could take the child's ear off their head and put it next to the speaker. We all know, if you have normal hearing or hearing loss, noise is very challenging, and it's especially a challenge and a struggle for deaf and hard of hearing students, whether they're babies or they're seniors in high school and beyond.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Oh, okay.
Please.
So anyway, we need to have FM systems funded. We need to have cochlear implants funded, so these children who don't benefit from hearing aids can have access to sound, and they're never off the air. Their equipment's always working. So I think why this is necessary. We want to front load these services, so we'll increase the chances that these children will be able to succeed at a level commensurate with their hearing peers, or even at a level above that, avoiding any negative impact on society. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
You go ahead. Hello, my name is Amanda Vass. Thank you for letting me speak to you today. I promised him that he could say a little something, but it won't make any sense to you, okay? Did you still want to say something? No. Okay. We're working on verbal language. We can sign, but we're working on verbal language. I'm the parent of a deaf child. Ollie here has cochlear implants. He got implanted at 1 year old, and a little before 2 years old when he got the second one. I also work for a nonprofit organization. We'll go home in a minute. I also work for a nonprofit organization that helps families that have children with hearing loss. And so my hands are all over the community, and Eugene is where I'm from. And what I find is that it costs, oh, he's changed his mind. Yeah? No, okay. What I find is that it costs a lot of money to raise a child with hearing loss. Like a lot of money. We have to buy an extra warranty for each cochlear implant. It costs $800 a year, just hoping that one is the one that breaks and not the backups, because we can't afford to, insure the backups that he has as well. The thing is, too, is that Ollie was born with a part of his brain missing. So this is what makes me really passionate about what I do, is that children that have hearing loss oftentimes are born with a fully functioning brain. And all they need is language. It's the only thing they need in order to succeed. And so Ollie's just learned how to walk in the last year, just very basic life skills. And everything comes so hard for him. But you have all these kids, sorry, I digress. But I still see his main thing of hearing loss being like the main disability that we need to work on, because it's how he has access to learning and to language into the world. I'd rather he be bedridden with language than out in the world walking with zero language. So for children that I see in our community parents are not able to afford all the things that insurance has, all these nooks and crannies of, well, we can pay for this, but we can't pay for this. And it just so happens that it's going to cost you hundreds of or thousands of dollars. So if we could help parents afford raising a child with hearing loss, we would really make huge strides in the community to have the children with hearing loss be able to read at a kindergarten level when they go to kindergarten and keep up with their peers, with their hearing peers. So I think that there could be a lot of good just for society as a whole if we had children with hearing loss able to keep up with their hearing peers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay. Chair Greenlick and members of the House Committee on Health Care, my name is Ann Smythe, and I'm speaking to you today as a parent of a child with hearing loss and as a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. In both of these roles, I've seen firsthand the negative effects of an insurance system that does not adequately address the needs of children with hearing loss. We know that when children with hearing loss are identified at birth, properly fitted with hearing devices by 3 months, and in early intervention programs by 6 months, that they have every possibility of developing age-appropriate speech and language and academic skills. Many will never even need special education services in school. Knowing what is possible for babies born with hearing loss makes it all the more tragic when their families are not able to access the proper equipment and services for their child. Reagan testified earlier about her insurance only offering one in-network audiologist with a 2-year wait list who wasn't even dealing with pediatrics. When families get a diagnosis of deafness, they're told time is of the essence and that they need to get amplification and start services immediately in order to access the short window of time a child's brain has to make sense of sound and learn language. Navigating the insurance process during the midst of this terrible diagnosis for a family with a newborn is daunting, to say the least. My own daughter was denied a second implant based on the fact that the device was experimental in spite of massive amount of research to the contrary. It took a year and help from a lawyer to get the denial reversed. In the meantime, she lost a year of valuable time when her brain was not hearing with 2 ears. Brain research tells us that kids with hearing loss do not have time to wait. This is a brain emergency. As a result of the great delay in getting her second implant, my daughter will never hear as well with that ear as she does with the other ear. If I had had someone to help me understand the process and explain the devices she needed with the insurance company, such as a case manager component that is in this bill, that would have been an immense help. So,
the insurance company cover the cochlear implant?
What? I'm sorry.
Did the insurance company cover the cochlear implant for you?
This was several years ago, so they weren't covering those standardly. Now more insurance does cover them, but I'm not sure if all of them do. So FMs are a tool that have become a necessity for deaf children. They not only help the child access learning in the classroom, but they also help the child hear during sports, hear when their parent tells them not to run in the street, hear in noisy play areas. FMs are part of the deaf child's best chance at reaching his or her full potential, and these should be covered by insurance. Fortunately, all these problems are solvable. Insurance can help families with a deaf child access the equipment and professionals they need to reach their full potential. What's more, it's a problem we should all want to solve, as it will lead to better outcomes for deaf children and less cost in special ed services down the road. This is the outcome we want for all our children. Please help make it happen.
Thank you very much. Will you call the next panel, please?
I will. The last two are Elise Brown and Jessica Adamson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Healthcare Committee. Elise Brown for America's Health Insurance Plans. AHIP is the National Trade Association of Health Plans across the country, and it's with difficulty that I sit here and have to be before you to share some concerns about House Bill 2392. But let me start with something personal. I'm a legal guardian for my adult sister, who's severely mentally ill, and she's had hearing aids her entire life. And as her legal guardian, I'm on the hook for a lot of healthcare out-of-pocket expenses. And oftentimes it's for hearing aids and upgrades and the like. So I hear the frustration from the witnesses before me. So I wanted to start with that. But I'm also a representative of the insurance industry, and it's my duty to also remind you, as you're considering bills, mandates like this, that there's a cost that we all bear, and I wanted to remind you of that. House Bill 2392 expands on the current mandate. We've talked a little bit about what the mandate that we have now does and doesn't do, but this does expand the current mandate by creating new requirements for coverage. It also will set a minimum benefit in there, a minimum benefit amount in statute, which we think is problematic. So next to me, I have one of my AHIP members from Providence. I'll let her share a little bit more about some of the implementation difficulties for this.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Jessica Adams sitting here on behalf of Providence Health and Services. And I'm not here to take a position on this bill today. The policy choice of whether expanding this mandate is up to you, and we defer to the wisdom of this body. I would not, however, be doing my job if I didn't raise what Elise just did, which is there is a cost associated with this. And again, we just want to make sure that as you make this decision that you're aware that there are rate impacts to increasing and to mandating a certain level of service. But again, the policy choice rests with you, and we are not taking a position as to whether or not that ought to occur. One point I do want to raise, though, and we would like to work with the advocates if this bill moves forward, specifically about the network requirements. As we understand the language today, it would be a certain amount per thousand on a health benefit plan. And so if you're looking at, for example, the individual market, and we represent about half of the individual market in Oregon, depending on the ebb and flow of how many folks that is, we're concerned about making sure that we can contract with enough folks to meet that requirement, and knowing that we try and set networks before we go out to the individual market. If there is a shift in that, being able to make sure that we can get enough specialists within that network. So setting that number is going to be important that we get that right. It's a conversation.
Man.
Fire alarm?
Didn't realize what I was saying.
Scared the shit out of me.
Me too.
I'm going